Welcome to Next Horizon, Zambia. We're going on a deep dive into Zambia's development landscape as 2024 wraps up and we look ahead to 2025.
You know, it's fascinating to see how interconnected these challenges and opportunities are in Zambia.
Yeah, definitely. So let's start with the basics, I guess.
Yeah.
Zambia, often it's associated with its copper mining industry, right?
Absolutely. Copper has been like the backbone of Zambia's economy for such a long time.
I see.
But there's a real push to branch out, diversify. Because relying too much on one thing, well, it's risky.
Right, like putting all your eggs in one basket, as they say.
Exactly. But even with all these efforts, growth hasn't really helped to reduce poverty for a lot of Zambians. And then you add climate change into the mix, and it gets even more complicated.
That's a good point. I was reading about how Zambia is experiencing more droughts, A&D floods. It seems contradictory. How is that even possible?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. It's all because of these rising temperatures and, rainfall that's just all over the place. You get these long, dry periods, then suddenly, bam, these huge downpours. And it makes things so unpredictable for so many sectors, but especially agriculture.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially for a country that depends so much on rain-fed agriculture.
Exactly. Like the 2024 drought, it was brutal. Maize yields dropped by, get this, 50 to 60%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It triggered a national emergency, and they even had to ration energy.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about those power cuts. They were pretty bad, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Nationwide, they had to cut power for like 8 hours every day.
Wow.
But in some places, it was even worse. I mean, some areas had no power for up to 21 hours a day.
21 hours. That's almost an entire day.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine, how people even function with that.
Yeah, it really shows just how fragile things are when those basic services go down.
Sure.
And, it affects everything. It really emphasizes how urgent it is to tackle how climate change is affecting our water. I mean, they're predicting that by 2100, water availability could drop by 13%.
That's a scary thought. So let's focus on agriculture for a minute. It's a big part of Zambia's economy.
Huge. It employs over 60% of the population. The problem is productivity is really low.
Why is that?
Well, climate change plays a big part, but it's not the whole story. It's tough for farmers to get their hands on good quality stuff, like fertilizer or better seeds.
I see.
And financing is a problem too. Many farmers just can't get the money they need to invest in their farms or try new techniques.
So it's like they're stuck in a cycle where, because they don't have the resources, their yields stay low, which makes it even harder to improve.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, only a tiny amount of land in Zambia is irrigated, something like 5.7%.
5.7. That's incredibly low.
It is. That's why the drought hit so hard. They're at the mercy of the weather.
So what could be done?
Well, imagine if they could invest in better irrigation systems. Give those farmers a steady source of water.
Yeah.
Combine that with better access to financing and higher quality inputs, and you could see a huge jump in productivity.
It seems like there's a lot of potential there.
Oh, there is. If they address those underlying issues and build up some resilience, the agriculture sector in Zambia could not only survive, but thrive.
Okay, so we've talked about water and agriculture. Now let's talk about energy. Where does Zambia get most of its power from?
Mostly hydropower, which, is a problem when there's a drought.
Right, like with those power cuts.
Exactly. It showed everyone just how risky it is to depend on a single energy source, especially one that's affected by climate change, like hydropower.
So what are they doing about it?
Well, the government is looking at different solutions. They're thinking about importing power from neighboring countries, and they're also planning to build some new power plants.
Were there any downsides to those solutions?
Well, importing power can get expensive, and it doesn't really solve the problem in the long term.
Okay.
And building new power plants, especially if they use fossil fuels, is bad for the environment and not very sustainable.
So then what?
Well, that's where renewable energy comes in. Think about it. Zambia gets over 3,000 hours of sunshine every year. Imagine harnessing all that power with solar energy.
That sounds promising, but what are the challenges?
The main problem is that renewable energy projects need a lot of money up front. We're talking solar panels, wind turbines, connecting it all to the grid. It's expensive, and that can be a big obstacle for a developing country.
So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need to deal with the energy crisis now, but they also need to invest in long-term sustainable solutions.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act. They need to find the right mix to meet their needs now and in the future.
Okay, let's move on to healthcare. What are some of the biggest challenges in Zambia's healthcare system?
Well, one of the most urgent issues is the lack of funding. A lot of healthcare facilities just don't have the basic equipment and medicines they need to provide quality care. And that problem gets worse when you look at access, especially in rural areas. Getting to healthcare services is a challenge when there's a lack of infrastructure and you have to travel long distances.
So limited resources and infrastructure are affecting multiple sectors.
You got it. It's a recurring theme in developing countries.
Hmm?
But Zambia's healthcare system has another big problem. They just don't have enough skilled healthcare workers.
How bad is it?
It's been an issue for a long time, but now it's really critical. The ratio of healthcare workers to patients is way below what the World Health Organization recommends.
Oh, wow.
And that affects the quality of care and how accessible it is.
So are there any positive developments in healthcare?
Well, even with these challenges, there are opportunities for improvement. For example, they could focus on strengthening primary healthcare services.
What do you mean by primary healthcare services?
You know, those are usually the first place people go when they need healthcare. So if we invest in that, it could really improve overall health outcomes.
How would that work?
Well, they could invest in community health workers. Those are people trained to provide basic healthcare and health education right in their communities.
Okay.
Especially in remote areas, they can bridge the gap between healthcare facilities and the people who need them.
It sounds like a practical and affordable solution. Are there other promising initiatives?
Digital health platforms are a really exciting possibility.
Interesting.
Think about telemedicine, mobile health apps, electronic health records. These could change how healthcare is delivered, especially in a country where infrastructure is limited.
Yeah, technology can be really powerful in situations like that. But doesn't Zambia have limited internet access?
You're right, that's a key point. Zambia has seen a lot of growth in internet and mobile phone use, but there's still a huge digital divide. Even with all the money they've put into fiber optic infrastructure, only about 36% of people have reliable internet access.
So closing that digital divide isn't just important for the economy, it's also important for healthcare. It shows how everything is connected.
Exactly. Bridging the digital divide is key to unlocking Zambia's potential. It's about access to information, education, and healthcare. It's an area where strategic investments could make a huge difference. But before we delve into those specifics, let's shift gears and talk about water and sanitation.
Okay.
It's a critical issue and one that's closely tied to public health, and, well, Zambia faces some serious challenges here. You're right, it is. Access to clean water and sanitation, it's like the foundation of public health. And the truth is, a lot of Zambians don't have it. Something like 32% of households don't even have a basic water source. And even more shocking, 64% don't have basic sanitation.
Those numbers are really alarming. It's hard to believe that in this day and age, so many people are still struggling with something as basic as clean water and sanitation.
It's a tough reality, and it leads to all sorts of problems. You know, when people don't have clean water and sanitation, diseases spread more easily. We saw this really clearly with the cholera outbreak in 2023-2024. 9 out of 10 provinces were affected.
I remember reading about that outbreak. It was a major crisis.
It was. Thousands of people got sick. It really stretched the healthcare system to its limits. And it was a wake-up call, you know. It showed just how vulnerable Zambia is when the water and sanitation infrastructure is weak.
So what needs to be done? Is it just a matter of building more infrastructure?
Well, that's definitely a big part of it. They need to invest in water treatment plants, pipelines, sanitation facilities, especially in rural areas and places that have been neglected. But it's not just about building stuff. It's also about changing behaviors and getting people to adopt better hygiene practices.
So it's a multi-pronged approach. Infrastructure, education, community engagement. It all needs to work together.
Exactly. We need to empower communities to take charge of their own water and sanitation, make sure it's sustainable for the long haul. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about education. You know, Zambia's done a really good job when it comes to primary school enrollment. Almost all kids are finishing primary school now. It really shows how committed they are to educating future generations.
That's great to hear. But does that mean they've solved all the problems in the education sector?
Well, high enrollment is a good sign, but it's only part of the picture. The quality of education is still a big concern. A lot of kids are finishing primary school without the basic skills they need.
So it's quantity over quality.
Yeah, kind of. Zambia has a really high learning poverty rate. That means that a lot of kids, even after years of school, can't understand simple texts that are appropriate for their age.
That's a big hurdle. What are the reasons behind this learning poverty?
There are a few factors at play. One is the teacher shortage. There just aren't enough teachers, especially in rural areas. So classrooms are overcrowded and teachers can't give each student the attention they need.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then there's the infrastructure problem. A lot of schools are in bad shape and they don't have the resources they need, like textbooks and learning materials. It's not exactly an ideal learning environment.
It's hard to imagine students doing well in those conditions. Are there other factors that affect how well kids do in school?
Poverty is a big one. Kids from poor families often face a lot of other challenges. They might be malnourished, they might not have access to health care, they might even have to work to help their families, which takes away from their schooling.
So it's a complex web of challenges, and it seems like you need a holistic approach to really make a difference in education.
Absolutely. To tackle learning poverty, they need to invest in teacher training, improve the schools themselves, and provide extra support to kids from disadvantaged backgrounds.
It sounds like a long-term project.
It is, but it's worth it. Investing in education is an investment in the future of Zambia. Now, I want to talk about the Copperbelt region for a bit. It's the industrial heartland of Zambia, and it really highlights the challenges and opportunities we've been discussing.
The Copperbelt is known for its mining industry.
Right.
What makes it unique in terms of development?
Well, it's a very densely populated area, and the economy is heavily reliant on mining. That creates its own set of challenges. Mining is important economically, but it can also be bad for the environment. It can contaminate the water and lead to deforestation.
Right.
And all the people moving to the area for mining jobs puts a strain on infrastructure and resources.
So it's like all the challenges we've talked about, but even more concentrated in the Copperbelt.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's not all bad news. The Copperbelt also has some unique opportunities for innovation and sustainable development. There's a good foundation there for branching out into other industries like manufacturing, agriculture, even tourism.
So a bit of a mixed bag. Big challenges, but also promising opportunities. What would sustainable development look like in the Copperbelt?
It's about finding a balance. They need to grow the economy without destroying the environment. And they need to make sure that everyone benefits, not just a select few. Investing in renewable energy, promoting responsible mining practices, and supporting the growth of other industries, those are all crucial steps.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, but it's essential for the future of the region.
Absolutely. And this brings us to something really important we need to talk about. Data gaps. We've been talking about all these challenges and potential solutions, but there are some areas where we just don't have enough information. And that makes it harder to make smart decisions.
Data gaps. That's surprising. Don't we have tons of data these days? How can there be gaps in our understanding of these issues?
It seems counterintuitive, right? But it's true. We have a lot of data, but often it's not the right kind of data, or it's not detailed enough to give us a clear picture at a local or regional level.
So it's not just about collecting more data. It's about collecting the right kind of data. Data that can help us make good decisions and create effective solutions.
Exactly. Take agriculture, for example. We know a lot about the national trends, but we don't have enough region-specific data, especially in the Copperbelt. We need more details about how farmers are doing things, what their yields are like, and what specific problems they're facing in each area.
It's like having a map that's out of focus. You can see the general landscape, but you can't really navigate without those finer details.
That's a perfect analogy. Without good data, we're kind of stumbling around in the dark. We're trying to solve problems without really understanding the situation on the ground.
So what are some other data gaps that need to be addressed?
Well, another important one is agricultural finance. We need more information about how farmers are accessing credit and insurance and how well those financial tools are working. To develop effective programs and policies, we need to understand the financial health of the agricultural sector.
It sounds like data is the key that unlocks more effective solutions. Are there data gaps in other areas too?
There are. For example, in the health sector, we don't have enough data on the impact of those power outages. How are hospitals and clinics managing? What's happening to patient care when the power goes out?
That's a really important question. So much of what hospitals do depends on electricity.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of gender. We need more data that's broken down by gender so we can see how these challenges are affecting women and men differently.
Right. It's easy to forget that these issues don't affect everyone in the same way.
You're absolutely right. We need to move beyond those general assumptions and really understand the experiences of different groups within Zambia.
So it's about getting a more complete picture and making sure that everyone's needs are being met.
Exactly. Oh, and one more data gap. I wanted to mention the performance of cooperatives.
Okay.
These farmer-owned organizations, They're really important for agricultural development, but we don't really know enough about how they work. Why are some successful and others aren't?
Cooperatives are often seen as a way to empower farmers and strengthen communities, so
Mhm.
understanding what makes them work is crucial.
Right. We need more data on things like their finances, how they're governed, and the impact they have on their members.
I see.
That information would be really valuable for policymakers and anyone working in development. It would help them support cooperatives more effectively. It's interesting how we've gone from these big, overarching development challenges to these very specific data gaps. It really shows how important it is to have a nuanced, evidence-based approach.
Yeah, it does. Data can help us move beyond assumptions and find solutions that actually work.
Mhm.
So as we wrap up 2024 and head into 2025, what does this all mean for Zambia's development? Where do we go from here?
Well, as we look at the year ahead, it's clear that Zambia is at a turning point. We've talked about all these interconnected challenges, climate change, poverty, limited access to resources. But we've also seen the incredible potential that exists.
Yeah, definitely.
And throughout this deep dive, we've realized that data is essential. It's the key to creating a more sustainable and equitable future for Zambia.
It's not just about having data, though. It's about having the right data.
You got it. Data that can help us understand the nuances, the differences between regions, the different ways men and women experience these challenges. Data that can guide us toward real, lasting solutions.
So as we look to 2025, what's the message for people who want to support Zambia's development?
The message is simple. Zambia has a bright future, but it needs everyone to work together. We need to support organizations that are gathering this crucial information, and we need to advocate for smart investments. Not just throwing money at the problem, but making sure those resources are used effectively.
It's about empowering communities,
Yeah,
giving them the information they need to make good decisions and hold their leaders accountable.
exactly. It's about understanding that development is a partnership. People with resources and people on the ground working together to create a better future for all Zambians.
That's a great message. So as we close out 2024 and look forward to 2025, let's take on this challenge. Let's support the people who are working to fill these data gaps, empower communities, and create real, lasting change.
Zambia has so much potential, and with a collective effort, a focus on data, and a commitment to partnership, we can make a real difference.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Zambia's development. Until next time, keep exploring those horizons.